the somber streets of a city shrouded in perpetual twilight, I walked with the weight of a secret that threatened to crush my spirit. My name is Alara, and I was born in a world where to see is to surrender your soul. Here, in a place where the sun never quite reaches, we are all born blind, our eyes sealed shut by nature's cruel hand. Only the government's gift of mechanical eyes, a supposed benevolence, grants us sight. But as I recently discovered, this gift comes with chains. The revelation came to me in whispers, hushed voices that spoke of a terrifying truth. Our mechanical eyes were not just windows to the world, but also doors through which unseen watchers peered into our lives. I had always felt an eerie presence behind my own gaze, a sense of being watched, but I dismissed it as paranoia. That was until I met Silas, a man whose mechanical eyes were different, unshackled from the government's sinister surveillance. In the dimly lit corridors of my apartment building, Silas revealed the horrifying reality.
They see what we see, hear what we hear. We are their puppets, Ilara.
He said, his voice a mixture of fear and defiance. His revelation shattered the fragile illusion of freedom I had clung to. The eyes that allowed me to marvel at the world's faded beauty were the very chains that bound me to an invisible overlord. The government's propaganda machines, towering screens that lined the city's decrepit buildings, always spewed messages of unity and safety. But beneath their comforting words lay a more sinister purpose. We were not just citizens, we were informants against our will, every moment of our lives an open book for those in power. My journey to uncover the truth began in the heart of the city, where the government's headquarters loomed like a monolithic sentinel. The streets were filled with people like me, their gazes vacant, not from blindness, but from the resignation to a life constantly monitored. The air was thick with despair, a tangible presence that clung to my skin as I made my way through the crowd. As night descended upon the city, I met with a group of rebels, each of us united by a common purpose, to find a way to sever the connection between our eyes and the government's prying gaze. Our meetings were shrouded in secrecy, cloaked in the shadows of the underground. The catacombs, a labyrinthine network of tunnels and crypts, provided the perfect haven from the prying eyes above. Here, in the bowels of the city, the government's surveillance was blind, its reach limited by the thick stone walls that had stood for centuries. "We need to find the source, the central hub controlling these eyes," said Mara, a fierce woman whose mechanical eyes glinted with a hint of rebellion. "There's a rumor of a facility deep within the government's quarters, where they process and store everything they see through us." The plan was perilous, a journey into the belly of the beast. But the alternative, a life of perpetual surveillance, was a fate worse than any danger we might face. We parted with the resolve to meet again, each of us aware that this might be our last taste of freedom. That night, as I lay in my bed, the darkness of my room felt comforting, a brief respite from the prying eyes that haunted my waking moments. But even in the darkness, I could feel them watching, waiting, an ever-present shadow in the recesses of my mind. The following days were a blur of hushed planning and furtive movements through the city's underbelly. Our group, a band of misfits bound by a shared desire for freedom, worked tirelessly to gather information about the government's surveillance hub. It was rumored to be a place shrouded in secrecy, its location known to only a few high-ranking officials. But desperation has a way of sharpening one's cunning, and it wasn't long before we had a lead. We met under the cover of night in a dilapidated building, the air heavy with the stench of decay. Silas, with his unmonitored eyes, had been crucial in our quest, scouting the labyrinthine city with a freedom none of us could afford.
The hub is hidden beneath the government quarters, deep underground,
He whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of rain pattering against the broken windows.
There's a network of tunnels that leads to it, but they are heavily guarded.
The plan was simple, yet fraught with danger. We would infiltrate the tunnels, disable the surveillance system, and destroy the hub, severing the omnipresent gaze that had haunted our every step. The thought of stepping into the lion's den sent shivers down my spine, but the fire of rebellion burned brighter. The night of our mission arrived with a storm, thunder rumbling like a war drum in the distance. We slipped through the shadows, our mechanical eyes our only light in the enveloping darkness. The city felt different that night, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for the storm to break. The entrance to the tunnels was hidden beneath an old warehouse, guarded by men whose eyes were as cold as the steel of their guns. We waited for the cover of thunder, and then struck with a ferocity born of desperation. The guards fell before they could raise the alarm, and we descended into the bowels of the city. The tunnels were a maze of darkness, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and metal. We moved cautiously, aware that one wrong step could lead us into a trap. The deeper we went, the more oppressive the silence became, as if the very walls were listening. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a vast chamber, the heart of the surveillance hub. It was a monstrous machine, its countless wires and screens pulsing with an unnatural life. In its center stood a console, the key to our salvation. Mara approached the console, her hands steady despite the weight of our fate resting upon her shoulders. She began to work, her fingers dancing over the buttons and switches. But as she did, an alarm blared, echoing through the chamber like the scream of some mechanical beast. The realization hit us like a physical blow. We had walked into a trap. The chamber was swarming with guards, their guns trained on us with deadly precision. We were caught, our dreams of freedom shattered by the cold reality of our predicament. As I stood there, the mechanical eyes that had been my curse now staring into the barrels of the guns pointed at us, I understood the true extent of our captivity. We were not just prisoners of this dystopian world, but of our own hope, a hope that had led us into the clutches of our unseen watchers. Captured and bound, we were dragged from the chamber and thrown into the cold, unyielding cells of the government's prison. The walls were stark, the air stale, a constant reminder of our failed rebellion. Our mechanical eyes, once our only connection to the world, now felt like shackles, binding us to an existence we had desperately tried to escape. In the solitude of my cell, the weight of our situation pressed down on me. The hope that had fueled our mission had fizzled out, leaving behind a bitter taste of defeat. I replayed our plan over and over in my mind, each time uncovering new flaws, new moments where we could have altered our fate. But the truth was inescapable. We had been outmaneuvered at every turn. Days, or perhaps weeks, passed in a blur of monotony. Time lost its meaning in the dim light of the cell. The only break in the endless cycle of despair came when the guards took us, one by one, for interrogation. It was during these sessions that the true extent of our surveillance became clear. "They've been watching us since the beginning," Silas said after one such session, his voice hollow. "Every meeting, every whispered plan, they knew it all." The realization that our rebellion had been nothing but a charade played out for the amusement of our overseers was a crushing blow. We were pawns in a game we could never win. One day the door to my cell opened to reveal not a guard, but an officer dressed in the crisp uniform of the government's elite. "Ilara," he began, his voice smooth and calculated, "you have been given a choice, a rare opportunity in these times." He explained that the government had been impressed by our resourcefulness and offered us a deal. In exchange for our cooperation, for becoming the very thing we despised, informants by choice, we would be granted our freedom. It was a twisted offer, one that preyed on our desperation. The decision tore at me. To accept meant to betray everything we had fought for, to become willing participants in our own oppression. Yet, refusal meant a lifetime in these cells, or worse. The officer left, his words hanging in the air like a noxious cloud. That night I lay awake, the darkness of my cell a mirror of the turmoil in my heart. The others were wrestling with the same choice, I knew. We were trapped, not just by the walls of our cells, but by the cruel machinations of a government that saw us as nothing more than tools for their own ends. The following day, when the officer returned, we gave our answer. Our voices were steady, but our hearts were heavy with the weight of our decision. We chose survival, but at what cost? As I walked out of the cell, a free woman in name only, I realized that freedom was an illusion in this world. We were all blind, not just by nature, but by the lies we chose to believe. The mechanical eyes that I once thought were my salvation were now a constant reminder of my betrayal. Released back into the city, we were shadows of our former selves. The bustling streets, once a symbol of the life we yearned to live freely, now echoed with the hollowness of our existence. Our mechanical eyes, once our windows to the world, had become our cages, forever binding us to the will of our overseers. As a coerced informant, each day was a torment of duplicity. I walked among the people I had once sought to free, knowing I was now a sentinel for the very force I despised. The vibrant colors of the city, which I had once marveled at, seemed muted, as if my betrayal had dimmed the very essence of the world. Silas and I met occasionally, our conversations strained under the weight of our unspoken regrets.
Do you ever think about what might have been?
He asked me one evening, his mechanical eyes reflecting the city's neon lights. Every day, I admitted, the words heavy with sorrow. But we made our choice, Silas. For better or worse, this is our life now. The government's surveillance hub, once our target, now stood as a constant reminder of our failure. I passed it often, the knowledge of what lay beneath its facade a gnawing ache in my chest. We had come so close to exposing the truth, to freeing ourselves from the chains of unseen watchers. But now, we were part of the very system we had fought against. As months turned into years, the lines between my true self and the role I had been forced to play began to blur. The city, with its endless surveillance, felt like a giant panopticon, each of us both prisoner and guard. My dreams of rebellion faded, replaced by a numbing acceptance of my fate. The end, when it came, was neither dramatic nor unexpected. A routine sweep of the city uncovered a new group of rebels, their plans to dismantle the surveillance system eerily similar to ours. I watched from a distance as they were rounded up, their faces etched with the same determination that had once fueled my own rebellion. In that moment, I saw the cycle of our existence in this dystopian world. We were trapped in an endless loop, our attempts at rebellion nothing but brief sparks in an oppressive darkness. The government's control was absolute, their surveillance not just a means of oppression, but a tool to crush any hope of resistance. As I turned away, my mechanical eyes capturing the scene for my overseers, I realized the true price of sight in this world. We had traded our freedom for the ability to see, but in doing so, we had become blind to the possibility of a life beyond the reach of unseen watchers. Our eyes may have been opened, but our spirits remained forever sealed in darkness. In this bleak world, where the price of sight was the soul itself, the true horror was not just in being watched, but in the realization that there was no escape from the gaze that penetrated every aspect of our lives.